Life, Kaiser. We're celebrating life. Hello and welcome to the Stiles Council. And it's another one of our specials where I'm talking to the great and good about their favourite England game. And I am incredibly excited about this one. The first one we did was a heartbreaking defeat. This was a absolutely thumping win. So that's nice. Joining me tonight is Twitter.com's Jonny Gabriel, otherwise known as Jonny Sharples. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. I like to do a bit of the guest intro stuff at the start because I'm never sure if anybody's listening right the way to the end. So just tell us a little bit about yourself now, and I think it's worth saying a little bit about the good work that Calm do as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm Jonny Sharples, as you said, and I'm mostly found on Twitter doing stupid jokes about football and making the best of what I can with Photoshop. And I can be found at Jonny Gabriel if anybody, like you say, you can't leave it to the end in case anyone turns off before I can plug myself. And I do a lot of work and a lot of awareness raising for a charity called Calm, who are a mental health charity who deal with suicide prevention and suicide awareness. So my Twitter account's quite a strange juxtaposition of stupid football jokes and then quite serious stuff about suicide and mental health. So it's a roller coaster and it's an adventure, much like supporting England is, to bring it back round to that.
Yeah. Well, you've chosen a game here that I must admit, I love this game and there is loads of ground to cover, but I didn't honestly think anyone would pick it. And I was genuinely, me and Chris are going to do one on each other at some point. And if you hadn't have picked this may well have been my game. And it's just, there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of ridiculousness. So we'll not keep you in suspense any longer. Wednesday, 28th of February 2001, England 3, Spain 0, which was notable because, Jonny, you explain?
It was Sven-Goran Eriksson's first game as England manager, even though it shouldn't have been. So, yeah, it was a fun one, an interesting one, and like you say, lots of stuff happened.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll go right to the start. Let's have a bit of context. Sven-Goran Eriksson gets the England job. I can remember when I sort of first heard that sentence, feeling like it was a new dawn and we were definitely going to win the European Championships, because that's what I do. I convince myself constantly that we're going to win things, and it's taken till being 39 years of age to actually get myself out of that. What was your reaction to Sven at first?
I think it was a good appointment in my mind. I think a lot of people remember what became of him rather than what he was before he was England manager, and he just won Serie A with Lazio, and he was the reigning manager of the year in Italy. So he was a big appointment for England, and I think it came of a time when things hadn't quite gone right. Kevin Keegan's time in charge, as much as I love Kevin Keegan being one of the very best Newcastle managers, he wasn't quite the right fit for England, I don't think. And so to get someone of the calibre of Sven as he was then was a massive draw, I think. Even though he was the first foreign manager, I think he was met with a lot of negativity in that regard, but he was definitely a great appointment in terms of what he'd won and where he was coming from as well.
It felt different at a time where it felt we needed to feel a bit different. We needed a bit of a spark from somewhere, and I was really excited about it. And so we'll go sort of straight into it. One of the first press conferences, he explained how he was really, really looking forward to picking his first squad of 22 players, and he had a rough idea who some of them were, but he was yet to settle on his 22. How many players did he pick, Jonny?
He picked just the 31 of the 22 he said he was going to pick. So, and then the names that he picked were some of the obvious ones, and then some of the less obvious, I think, is the best way to put a few of them.
Yeah. So the first thing is completely, well, like you say, 31 names instead of 22. I tell you what that says to me. guilty. Get a new rule book. Then the squad itself, we'll go through it. Just the 4 goalkeepers for a friendly. Seaman, Martin, James and Wright. Defenders, both the Neville brothers. Brown, Ferdinand, Campbell, Ball, which is a name we might come back to. Carragher, Ashley Cole, Echiog and Chris Powell. He picked Chris Powell, and there's a brilliant quote about him picking Chris Powell, which was, well, I've seen him play twice, so I thought, yeah, why not? Which is just the sort of confidence you want when you pick for England for the first time. Midfielders, Dyer, Beckham, Scholes, McManaman, Joe Cole, Carrick, Lampard, Parler, McCann, Button, Barnby. And forwards, Heskey, Owen, Fowler, Andy Cole, Sheringham and Phillips. Yeah, there's some names in there straight away, isn't there, that we probably need to talk about.
It's a big old squad, and yeah, like you say, there's some definite... If someone like Chris Powell or Gavin McCann was picked now, I think Southgate would have a very rough ride.
Yeah. The thing is, I can sort of think back to the time, and he obviously... It was a very... You can sort of see his justification, because he comes into English football. He spends a month or 6 weeks intensively watching English football. So yeah, anybody who's in form at the time is going to get handed a shirt. But straight away there's names in there and you just think, well, that was just never, ever going to work, was it? I don't know. It's a really strange one. But I think it's also worth pointing out, he I don't know if you know this story, but he did actually have his wings clipped a bit. He wanted to include Gareth Barry as well, but Howard Wilkinson basically begged him to leave him with the under-21s because they had a big game at the same time. And he wanted to bring in Paul Ince and Dennis Wise. He was disappointed he couldn't have them as well. So it was nearly a 34-man squad.
You know, you can only pick what's in front of you and make a decision when you're in training. But I think the size of the squad and the names in it is one of the reasons, before you even get to the match itself, why it's my favourite match. Because I think I was young. I think I was 13 when the match happened, and I come out of the Kevin Keegan era, and obviously it's very disappointing. I think even at that stage you sort of associate the same old names with the England squad, and I think part of me thought that Sven, being from overseas, would come in and have a fresh look at it, and that's sort of what he did. And he didn't pick just the names, and he didn't just pick from the big clubs. He went out and actually looked at who was in form and who was playing well, and that's why people like Chris Powell got a chance, and people like Gavin McCann and Michael Ball got a bit more of a chance than maybe they wouldn't have got if it was someone coming in with pre-existing ideas of who should and shouldn't be in the England squad.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Ball was a shocking footballer, though, wasn't he?
He was. I think he lost his place because the next squad, there was 2 qualifiers, and I think he was one of the ones that didn't make it into the next squad, and obviously never won another cap again.
Yeah, but quite rightly so as well, because I think, Chris Powell, I always quite liked as a footballer, and we were struggling on that left-hand side at the time, and I had absolutely no issue with that, but Michael Ball was, I just never... he's one of those players I can't physically remember ever seeing him have a good game or doing anything of note to make me remember him fondly in any way. So, but it's interesting to see that obviously you've got the sort of British press who are used to things being done a certain way, and straight away Sven comes in and just throws all that out the window. And I think I still look back on that and think that's great, isn't it?
I think so. I think as well, I don't know if you know this, I'm sure you do, you've got a massive wide range of knowledge of football, especially when it comes to England. But Sir Bobby Robson was the first choice to take charge of the matches that Sven couldn't take charge of. But Newcastle wouldn't let him go and be an interim England manager, so that's why they ended up with, was it Peter Taylor or was it Howard Wilkinson for the friendly?
They both ended up taking one at different points, didn't they? It was Taylor the Italy game?
He was the one that gave the
away.
Captaincy to Beckham, wasn't he?
Yes.
And then Sven kept it. But yeah, they wanted Bobby Robson, and it would have been interesting to see what sort of players he would have picked. I don't think he'd have picked Gavin McCann or Michael Ball. But
no, but there's absolutely no way Kieran Dyer wouldn't have been in that squad. But I think I can sort of understand that, because like Bobby Robson is not the sort of man who could just go and take over for a couple of games and then just leave it at that. He would just get way too involved, I think. So I can sort of see Newcastle's point there. But it was a fascinating time, and I remember really looking forward to this game, because there was sort of this feeling of, is he going to sort of play some weird system? Is he going to play players all over the place? And when it came to the first 11, it was actually quite a conventional team, apart from a couple of players' position. Talk me through Michael Owen's role from the first minute.
I think he played. So Andy Cole was picked as the sort of focal point striker, and then Michael Owen was sort of the number 10 drifting around,
playmaker
between. Which he did end up doing that at Newcastle for a little bit, where he played up front, well, just behind Obafemi Martins and Mark Viduka. But at this point in his career, it was sort of pre the very bad injuries that sort of curtailed his pace and things like that. So he was still, rapid. The Michael Owen that had, go on to win the Ballon d'Or or just won it. So it was an odd place to decide to play him, when the best place to surely put him was right up the top, so he could use his pace to get behind the Spanish defence. But Sven knows best.
Well, we'll get into the game in a bit, but he actually went on to have a really good game there. But so he picks the team. We'll do the England team in a minute, but the Spanish team, it's not a spoiler to say we beat them 3-0 and we played pretty well on the night. But this wasn't a sort of Spanish team that was way before they were good or anything like this. It was Casillas in goal. Pep was still playing. Quite famously gets nutmegged, doesn't he? But was it Chris Powell nutmegged?
Yeah, Chris Powell down the left-hand side nutmegs Pep Guardiola. So if that piece of commentary is not Chris Powell's message tone on his phone now, he's not human, I don't think.
But there was also Gaika Mendieta, Raul played, Luis Enrique was captain, Ivan Helguera, Javi Moreno played, Santiago Canizares, who I used to really like, came on for Casillas, Echeverria. It was a good Spanish side, and I sort of, my experience of Spain at the time was that, obviously we beat them in 1996 and they weren't a team we sort of played with any frequency. So I didn't quite know what to expect from them. And going into the game, I thought this might be quite a tight, close game. And the England side that night, David James in goal, which I think David James was a good goalkeeper. But if you're picking 4 goalkeepers for your squad, I'm not sure he was the best of the 4 at the time. Talk me through your opinion of Phil Neville, because I have been accused of being a little bit cruel about Phil Neville's footballing career.
I think Phil Neville is, I think Michael Cox described players as number 12s on Twitter the other day, which is basically just your utility man. And I think that's basically what Phil Neville was. I think he obviously played a lot for Everton in midfield. I think at Man United he played at full-back, tended to be the second choice backup to both his brother and Dennis Irwin for a while. But in an England shirt, I can't believe he got to over 50 caps. Obviously at Euro 2000, he was the one that gave away the penalty against Romania. So I think he was sort of just there because he could fill in a lot of positions reasonably averagely.
Yeah, he was. I'm talking to somebody here who is an expert, but he was a player I will confess, even though I didn't like him in real life, I did used to buy him a little bit on Football Manager and John O'Shea, because I liked to have them on the subs bench because they could cover right across the back 4. So I didn't necessarily have to pick separate fullbacks or a fullback that could do both, as well as a centre half. But my opinion of Phil Neville and his footballing career was that it was not his fault he kept getting picked. And I'll leave it at that. But Chris Powell on the other side, then the centre-backs, Rio Ferdinand and Sol Campbell, we'd kill to have them two nowadays, wouldn't we?
I think, yeah, especially when you consider that someone like Jamie Carragher, I know he was young and he was a bit of a sort of, in his early days, number 12 utility sort of player before he really cemented down that he was a very good centre-back. To have him as backup, and I'm sure we'll get to Ugo Ehiogu as well, to have them, Ehiogu barely touched the squads a lot of the time, and he'd probably be a very good England defender if he was playing now.
Yeah, we left Woodgate out for this game, who had been regular in the squad, and I was looking at our sort of from about 1998 to about 2008. I was looking at some of our defensive options, and it was making me cry a bit. I mean, we won't even get on to like how good Ledley King was and various others. Then midfield, of course, you've got David Beckham, who was captain for the night. He kept that captaincy, as you said, and we've talked a lot on the Stiles Council already about David Beckham. Almost impossible to dislike in an England shirt. Do you agree, or were you one of the few that didn't like him?
I have a lot of love for David Beckham. I think as a professional, I think to have the career that he had, and I think people are very unfair on his abilities. I think he's a lot better than a lot of people say. It's not just all down to hard work. There's a lot of natural talent, and it's not just free kicks and corners that he brings. So I think he always gave everything he could for England. I think he just really liked and really acknowledged the duty he had as being a professional footballer. And he always gave everything he could. Sometimes you could say to the detriment of the team, but he always did himself proud, I think. Yeah,
and I think that's quite an important point you make, that there's sort of a bit of revisionism from a lot of people who didn't see the bulk of his career, who will tell you, oh, he was not very good, all he could do was cross the ball. That really wasn't the case. But also you've got Paul Scholes, who frustrated me a lot in an England shirt, but I don't necessarily think that was all Paul Scholes' fault by any stretch. Nicky Barmby, who I love and who we'll come on to when we talk about the first goal. And Nicky Butt, who, let's remember, Pelé himself said he was the very best player at the 2002 World Cup. Who are we to argue with Pelé, eh?
Who are we to argue with a man that doesn't know how old he was in 1950, whether he was 6 or 7 when he was actually 9, so and can't count his own goals. So no arguments from me with Pelé.
And then we've got Owen and Cole up front. So we've got a decent Spanish side. We've got a good England side with a slightly different front two. And we'll get into the game a bit now. There's a lot of things around this game, a lot of little random things that I think we'll probably mention as we go through. But the game starts with Nicky Butt absolutely smashing a Spanish midfielder. And I've tried to look for the clip and I can't find it on any of the highlights or on Dailymotion or YouTube or anywhere. And for some reason, the referee, I mean, any other referee in the world, I think would have blown up for it. But it was a Greek referee on the night. Absolutely fine. Ball rolls to Nicky Barmby and he shoots wide. And it sort of almost like set the tone a little bit, because England were pretty much on the front foot from the get-go, weren't they?
I think so. I think there's a couple of opportunities for Spain when it's still 0-0. I think the dip-in volley, I can't remember.
Helguera's one.
I think that was when it was still at 0-0. But I think apart from that, Spain weren't, pulling up any trees, as it were. And I think it was a lot England opportunities quite early on.
Yeah, well, the pattern was that sort of Spain were passing it around quite nicely, but then England would win it and break really, really well and really quite incisively. And like Barmby had a couple of efforts and Scholes had a shot straight at the keeper. That nutmeg you mentioned with Chris Powell, he had a really good time in that first half. It was a shame he had to go off at half time. He was actually, they didn't want to sub him. He actually had I think he picked up a thigh strain. But he was bombing down that side at one point and putting some really good crossing. He was unfortunate on a couple of his crosses because it was Nicky Barmby on the end of them, and he just needed somebody who was about 5 inches taller. So he was, England were doing pretty well, and we'll get to the first goal and almost the vindication for playing Michael Owen as a playmaker because the ball's punted forward by blonde hair era David James. There's a header on in midfield. Andy Gold taps it back to Michael Owen. And yeah, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, Michael Owen, justifying his number 10 shirt and his position, plays a lovely little sort of over the top, but not like hugely over the top, just sort of floated over the top ball. And Nicky Barmby, who's sort of occupying the same space almost that Michael Owen's supposed to be playing in, runs through, excuse me, and comes the ball's dropping, and I think Casillas comes out, and Barmby just manages to get there first and knock it into the net. So every bit of vindication for Sven's decision to play Michael Owen as the number 10.
It's actually it's a really good goal on reflection because it's a great finish from Barmby, who I think was quite an underrated player. Was this Liverpool era Barmby?
I think 2001. It might have he was part of the treble winning side at Liverpool, I think. Which would have been that same season. Yeah. So yeah, I think he was.
Yeah. So and I really like Nicky Barmby for England. He was, he's not roller coasters and fireworks, but he was always just really sort of solid. He was always a 7 out of 10. And of course, there's the great fact about the debut goals, isn't there?
Yeah, he scored the first goal. Was it against Moldova of Glenn Hoddle's reign as England manager, and then obviously gets the one as first goal of Sven's era. I don't know what he was doing when Kevin Keegan took over, but obviously having a day off. But
yeah, he also did a load at club level, didn't he? Scored on various debuts at club level as well. So a man for the big occasion. But yeah, it was a really, on reflection, it was a really well worked goal, and I've got like quite a vivid memory of it. But I was quite sort of surprised going back to it that Casillas don't really do anything wrong. Barmby just sort of gets there before him and just holds his nerve and just pushes it past him. It's a great little finish. And as I said, I think at the time it's pretty much what England deserved, really. There's a little sort of flurry of action before half time, but half time is where things get interesting, shall we say. So I'll sort of go through the subs and then give me your sort of feelings on them. David James comes off for Nigel Martyn. You got Ekihog comes on, Ball comes on, McCann comes on, Lampard comes on, Heskey comes on. Off goes Phil Neville, Nicky Bart, Rio Ferdinand, David Beckham, Paul Scholes. The first thing I want to sort of get your opinion on. Beckham goes off from the right wing. Emile Heskey comes on and plays as a right winger.
Yeah, it's I have so much love for Emile Heskey. It's borderline obsession to say he never played for a team that I support. And I think it sort of shows you just how willing Emile Heskey was to do the cause for whatever he could. He played on the left a lot for England, and he played on the right, obviously, in this match, and then up front. And I think it's a strange decision for Eriksson to push him out to the right when you consider that Owen and Heskey for Liverpool at the time were doing bits. So, it's strange if you're going to bring Heskey on, not to sort of bring him on for Andy Cole and see what Owen can do off Heskey, which obviously played dividends several times throughout Sven's era. It's an odd one. I think if you were choosing someone to come on for David Beckham and replace him, I don't think Emile Heskey would perhaps be your first choice.
No, I think I really like Emile Heskey, probably not as much as you, but I really, really like Emil Heskey. And what I liked him playing anywhere but as a striker. So when he did those jobs either side, I actually thought he was much better, and he was a very, very willing runner, and he played really well in the second half here. We'll get onto the goal in a minute, but his England career is he's another one who's I think history is kinder to him than the present day was. I think, he got an awful lot of stick. He became, I wouldn't say he was the brunt of the joke, but he became the scapegoat for every time England didn't score 4 goals, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he was very unfairly. I think he didn't sort of have to score because Michael Owen was so good that Heskey
it was a
make the space, make
he?
the space and make the opportunities. And I think if you look back now, I think people will go and look at Emil Heskey's Wikipedia page and see how many caps he won and then how many goals he scored and perhaps how many goals he didn't score. But those words on a screen don't tell the full picture of how effective and how important Emil Heskey was to the way that England would and should have played, especially with Michael Owen alongside him.
And I tell you what, in terms of England careers, I'd have took Emil Heskey up front over Andrew Cole any day of the week because, Andrew, now there's a player who really felt the weight of a white shirt. And, Emil Heskey was always sort of relatively comfortable in it in a way that others weren't, like Andrew Cole. And we had this sort of great stockpile of strikers at the time, Owen and Sheringham still knocking about, and it was a really sort of rich vein. But Heskey was the one who could come in and sort of always be a 6 or 7 out of 10. And there were others who came in. I mean, Andy Cole had some dreadful games for England. Just some awful games. And I think he ended up with about something like 17, 18 caps and 1 goal, and that. When you think sort of how prolific he was as a club striker, it sort of tells you all you need to know, really. So I think Heskey's this game is sort of a good indication of what Heskey was good at, really. Now talk me through the England career of Gavin McCann.
It was 45 minutes long. I don't think there's any. I think one of the strange things is that, like we said, there were some qualifiers a month after this match, and Michael Ball obviously lost his place. Chris Powell kept his place, but Gavin McCann also kept his place in the squad, and Kevin Phillips, who was on the bench for this match, didn't keep his place in the squad. So it's almost as if Sven looked at Sunderland at the time and thought the real brains behind Sunderland isn't the one that won the European Golden Boot, the only Englishman to have done it. It's that man Gavin McCann. So keep him around and we'll see what'll happen. But 45 minutes long as Nicky Butt's replacement, and that's Gavin McCann's whole England career. Yeah,
his one big contribution comes with 10 minutes to go. We'll discuss it when we get there. But so that the second goal, Ekiog's come on at half time, and he was very much a man on a mission. He was a boyhood Villa fan. He was a Villa player at the time, wasn't he?
I think he moved to Middlesbrough by that point.
Was he at Borough at that point?
I think he was, and I think he was getting a little bit of... Because this match was played at Villa Park.
Yeah.
And it's part of another reason why this match is so good is because it was part of that England tour where Wembley was being rebuilt, so they played a few different matches at a few different places. And I think Ekiog was getting a bit of stick from what I remember from the Villa fan, from the crowd at Villa Park.
But he really responded to that, and he was a bit like a man on a mission. He was really sort of trying to play the ball out of defence. He was trying to be the sort of towering defender when needed, and he really stood out. And the second goal, he's up there at a set piece, and he basically jumps into he jumps up to win the ball. Casillas comes out, and it just looks such a mismatch, doesn't it? Because Ekiog was just like a perfect physical specimen at the time, wasn't he? And then you've got little sort of scrawny, still quite young Iker Casillas comes up to try and get the ball, and it was just never going to happen, was it? Casillas basically just sort of bounces off him, and then the Ehiogs won the ball, nods it down, and who's there, ready, poised to volley it in?
It's big Emil Heskey with I think it's his second England goal. You know, he's always almost halfway to his total tally by that point. He sort of kung fu kick. It's a very strange finish. It's sort of he attacks it with all the vigour of Bruce Lee.
Yeah, it's the thing about this finish is it's also completely unnecessary, because you're right. He's got 2 feet off the ground when he hits it, and he goes. It's desperation to sort of volley it with his right foot, isn't it? When he could have just swept his left foot and put his laces through it, and I think it would have gone in no problem whatsoever. But again, like, I think sometimes we as football fans, I think there's a bit of a snobbery around sort of set piece goals and being good at corners and set pieces. England were bloody good at them for a long time. I mean, I don't think we are anymore. I mean, I say this after Gary Cahill's goal against Nigeria the other week. But, you know, there was a clear plan here, because as you watch, you can see players drop off. You can see Ehiogu is the man who in training has been tasked with going to the front post. And it works, doesn't it?
I think we were blessed with people that could take good set pieces as well. Beckham's obviously gone off by this point, but Lampard was taking the corners as well, and he could, you know, hit a ball very well. And Scholes was around. I know he didn't take. He'd gone off as well by this point, but he could take a free kick and he could put a cross in. So I think, and you have people on the end of it that can do well. I know it was a few months later, but England against Greece, we score our first goal in that match from a corner as well. Sheringham heads it in. And then at the World Cup itself in 2002, Sol Campbell gets a goal and Rio Ferdinand gets a goal from set pieces as well. So I think it was a combination of having people that knew how to get on the end of crosses, and then we had people that could put the crosses in pinpoint to begin with.
I always felt with Sven, I thought it was one thing after the sort of after the chaos of Keegan. That was the one thing that you could see Sven worked on quite a bit. I mean, you're quite right. If you've got David Beckham in your side, then why wouldn't you exploit that to the absolute fullest? And yeah, I always felt we had a plan at set pieces. It always felt like we knew what we were doing, and it was just good. It was just good. But so we're 2-0 up, and like, you know, we're sort of pretty much on top. England do what they do when they're 2-0 up and end up sitting too deep, and there was quite a lot of sort of again, a lot of Spanish possession and a few sort of flashed shots wide, but nothing sort of major. Javi Moreno had come on at half time, and he was much better than Erzaz, who'd been playing up there at the start, much more lively. But England are on top, and then, you know, we only bloody go and get another goal, don't we?
We do, and it's the Villa fan, the man at is it the Holt end?
Yeah, in front of the Holt end.
Yeah, Ugo Ehiogu. You know, I think Canizares had come on by this point, and he was just as scared of Ugo Ehiogu as Iker Casillas was, I think.
And the corner comes in. It's a Lampard corner, isn't it? And there is just, I mean, it's not so much a free header as I noted watching the replay that the two nearest players to him on his right and his left are actually England players. There's just literally no one there, and he rises, meets it, and it's just a great header. It's just a really, really good header, and he storms off, and it's a bit of a lovely celebration, really, as well, because as you said, it's all good.
Yeah, it's also one of my favourite parts of this match. Ugo Ehiogu obviously runs in front of the Holt end and then starts pointing at the back of his shirt, not realising that the shirt didn't have his name on the back of it. So he's essentially just pointing at the number 15 to a crowd of people that would be celebrating him a couple of years beforehand.
Yeah, it was sort of like 3-0 up against Spain. I mean, even though, as I said, this wasn't necessarily the Spain that we would come to know or a Spain that we were particularly scared of, it just felt like, your new manager, Sven's in, everything's good, things changing. And then, of course, England go and concede a pretty sort of... Ekihog is absolutely high as a kite on adrenaline, and we concede a penalty. I'm still... don't get me wrong, I'm not bitter, but we're 17 years on from this, and I'm still not sure that's a penalty.
It's a soft one, and you'd be annoyed if it was given against you. Maybe the Greek referee just wanted to make things a bit more interesting for the last few minutes and get Spain on the score sheet.
Yeah, well, what happens is it's McCann's one great contribution to his England career is he tries to foul. I think it's Helguera. Was it Helguera? No, it may not have been Helguera at the time. It was a Spanish midfielder anyway. He takes a heavy touch. The Spanish midfielder turns on the ball, and McCann tries to foul him, succeeds, but he basically plays the ball straight through to Javi Moreno. So the referee waves play on. Moreno goes into the box. Ekihog sort of puts his arm across him. I think it starts outside the box as well. And he gives the penalty. So Javi Moreno steps up to take it. Big Nigel Martin in goal. What happens next?
Oh, he only goes and saves it, doesn't he? So
yeah, bloody saves it. And it's a good save as well, isn't it?
Yeah, he dives off to his Martin's left, Moreno's right, and just punches it away and gets it into an area where no one else can reach it. I think does it go out for a corner, or does it just trail off
it goes
to the
out.
left-hand side?
I think it goes out for a corner. And Ekihog comes straight over, punch in the air, slapping him on the back. It's just a friendly, mate. Calm down. But worth talking a little bit about Nigel Martin, because really good goalkeeper who had a reasonable England career, but sort of slightly unfortunate, do you think, to sort of be playing in the time of some other really, really good keepers? Because, he did get 23 caps, but obviously he was always the one who was competing against somebody else, wasn't he? He was never really our natural number one.
No, and he was definitely, if you ever saw him play for Leeds in the mid to late 90s, he was definitely good enough to be England number one. It just so happens that you had Seaman and you had Flowers and you had Walker as well get picked, and there was good options in goal across the board, I think.
Talking briefly about the goalkeeping, we sort of glossed over it when I was doing the squad, really. The great goalkeeping hope at the time, and the player that we were all convinced was going to go and get 100 to 120 caps, was Richard Wright, of course.
Premier League winner Richard Wright.
Yeah, who was in the squad, didn't get on the pitch on the night, but yeah, he was another one who he looked like he had all the potential in the world, but then, England-wise, that sort of friendly away, was it at Malta, just destroyed him when he conceded those two penalties. And I always think it's funny with goalkeepers. There was somebody made a point on a podcast this week, and I think it was obviously in relation to Karius, that a lot of goalkeepers completely change after a single performance. So, like Joe Hart's entire sort of career changes after that Panenka, and Richard Wright's changes after that Malta game. So it's a weird position, goalkeeper. It's a strange one, but I sort of think England have been blessed with some really good ones, haven't we?
I think after this, obviously, Paul Robinson appears on the... he replaces sort of Seaman after sort of a brief interlude of David James, and then David James re-emerges. So I think there have been definitely some good ones over the years. I think the ones in the 90s perhaps were better than the ones in the later years. And hopefully we're sort of coming back round to having few decent options that can rival one another again. So,
England 3, Spain 0, 2001, done. And it was just a great game. It was just a great game and a great feeling around England at the time. So, I can only thank you for picking it, really, and giving me the chance to relive it as well.
Yeah, any excuse, I'm like, any excuse to talk about Gavin McCann, and I'm right there.
We finish these the same way every time. Favourite non-Paul Gascoigne England player?
I thought about this. I had a couple of. I'll give my sort of my two that I thought about saying, which was Emil Heskey, because I have a lot of love for him, and so similarly Owen Hargreaves. I think he was chastised for sort of daring to come for a youth system abroad, by a lot of the English press, but he put in some incredible performances, especially at Euro 2004, and it's just a shame that he was injured. But I think in my mind there can only be one man as my favourite England player, someone that's captained England. It's Jonathan Wilkes from soccer. No, it's Alan Shearer, the greatest footballer to have ever worn any coloured jersey. He's the whole reason that I enjoy football. He's the whole reason I started following football. He's the reason I support Newcastle, whether that's a good thing or not. And he's the man that got me interested in England as well after Euro '96. So he has a lot of blame to be pinned on him for everything that came afterwards in my life.
Yeah, I Shearer is there again. There's a slight revisionism around Shearer that there are some people who think, oh well, he was like the perfect player at the perfect time because he was sort of he's already now like a relatively old-fashioned striker and all that. Absolute crap, he'd be absolutely fine as part of a front three with two people feeding him either side. Be absolutely happy as Larry, and worst case scenario, just drop a bit deep and just larrup it in from 25 yards, wouldn't he?
He could score every single type of goal you could think of. If you go back and watch his goal compilations, as I often do on the lonely dark nights, you can just see what sort of goals he was scoring. He could score from the volley against Everton, and there was tap-ins, there was headers, there was free kicks. There was somewhere he'd have the initial shot, and then the goalkeeper would save it, and then he'd add that shot from 7 yards, and he was the one kicking it back in the net from a couple of yards out. So he was a very intelligent striker, and he knew how to use his body, which is a form of intelligence as well. So he was an incredible player, and I think I do think there are some. I know it's a bit of a cliche to say, but I do think there are some similarities between him and Harry Kane. And if Harry Kane can have half the career that Shearer had, then he's a very lucky man.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's non-England based, but I've always said that there should be some sort of like secret meeting or secret club for players who have lobbed Peter Schmeichel, where it's just Alan Shearer, Albert, Davor Suker, just meet up like once a year at the sort of like in a hollowed out volcano. Like that. If
Newcastle could have signed Davor Suker and played him with Alan Shearer, then my 90s dreams would have come true. Yeah, sadly, I can only do it on all versions of Championship Manager. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you ever so much for joining me. This is sort of only the second one of these specials we've done, but it's rapidly becoming one of my favourite things because it's going over these sort of old England games is so far up my Sesame Street. It's moved in next door and is helping me with the garden. So again, I can only thank you for picking a great game.
Thank you for asking me to pick one to begin with.
No problem. Excellent. Well, thank you for listening to the Stiles Council. You can find us on Twitter at, I think it's at Sphinx FTBL is the sort of main feed for all our various podcasts and what have you. We are on the internet, but I've not written it down, so I'm going to assume it's thestilescouncil.co.uk, and I shall await Chris Nee's retribution if it's not. Thank you very much for listening. See you next time.